What's up, everyone? This is Marc D'Amico. I just want to say thank you for giving us a listen or a watch. And please do not forget to rate, subscribe, or review us. We appreciate you giving us a listen. And here's the next episode of View from the Rafters, behind the scenes with the Boston Celtics, presented by FlexCar. All right, the Boston Celtics have been going for the jugular this season. They sit atop the NBA. They have been the entire season. And I just want to point out that it's not just the players who have been going for the jugular. The marketing team has as well. It's all-star voting season, and the marketing team for the Celtics is pushing all 5 starters to be in the NBA All-Star game. So we had to bring in NBC Sports Boston's Chris Forsberg to discuss this. He's here with me and Abby Chin.
Is it okay if I don't have the same amount of green Kool-Aid in me as the marketing?
No, you look around, okay? It's all green.
Okay.
It's all green. No, we can be realistic.
That's why we're here, Forsberg.
We can be
That's
realistic.
why we invited you. We thought you could jump on board.
But Chris, 5 players from a single team have never made the All-Star team.
And I feel like we can confidently say that is a thing that is going to persist long into the future.
Yes, unlikely that all 5 guys get in. But for 4 players, is this possible?
So what, 2017-18 Warriors got it 2 years in a row, right? So you're essentially saying that if you're a team that wins 69 to 72 games.
Well,
so you're saying there's a chance.
Yeah, they're on track for upper 60s right now. But I will say 2015 was another instance with the Hawks. You got guys like Jeff Teague and Kyle Korver who certainly don't have the name cachet.
Go look at the
Derrick White and
Eastern
Jrue Holiday.
Conference at that point. It was
How far
it's true.
They were ahead.
It was a different world at that point. I think the hardest part is it's not so much that the Celtics players, the Celtics starting 5 as a whole, do not deserve full consideration for all 5 or 4, however number you want to go. It's that the East is loaded with individual talent. And so, like in a weird year, I could see definitely making a pitch for 4 guys. But I think what you're actually going to run into is the opposite problem, where it's going to be hard to get even 3 because there's no easy case for the 3. There's not like, it's definitely this guy, and this guy. And I think when coaches vote, you run into an issue where they split the vote, and Trae Young, even though he's on a team that's 11th in the Eastern Conference, is going to get more consideration, which is maybe not fair, but that's the way we do it. And so, like, I can't.
And I do think it will have to be a lot of the coaches voting the players in. Jayson Tatum probably the only guy who's going to get in as a starter because of fan voting. But with Chris Forsberg, I think you're the perfect test case for this. Because we have brought you in to make the case for all 5 Celtics.
Yes.
And then
after I
know
said,
you can do this.
Yes,
yeah, right.
We're going to delete the start of this.
Yeah, we can convince every reserve coach across the Eastern Conference.
So I think let me just preface this all by saying, like, I think that is the roadmap. Is like Brad has to get on the phone with all of his old friends and be like, "Hey, like when you vote, if you could vote for X, Y, Z, and in that order." Like, depending on how many Celtics you get on your ballot, then that is your best chance to get more than 2 players. If Brad and Joe are just like, hey, vote for whoever you want, you run the risk of splitting it, even though everyone is deserving in their own way. Like, okay, if I am...
then what's the priority?
So you're asking me what I would do?
Yes.
All right.
Oh.
So first off, we take Jayson Tatum off the board because Jayson Tatum is probably going to make it as a fan-voted starter.
He's definitely going to make it as a starter.
You are much more...
we are filming this before the first set of returns.
Yes, okay. And that's another thing. Like, what's going to happen now is, like, before this goes up, they're going to have, like, monster nights. I'm going to seem stupid for saying, like, weird things. But, Tatum makes it as a fan-voted starter. If I am a coach in the Eastern Conference, what I would typically revert back to is... who am I game planning for the most, right? Like, who am I sitting when I start game planning for a game? Well, who is the first guy that I say I need to focus on? And so Jaylen.
Can I interject real quick? Because when
I almost got through the first player,
but it's our podcast.
Yes.
But with a Celtics team that has so much depth, there's no way you're going to game plan for someone like Derrick White or for Jrue Holiday, right?
That's what I'm saying.
Because
but
of that?
In the mind of a coach voting for reserve, you're thinking, I spend so much more time worrying about Trae and Tyrese Halliburton and, like, all these guys, and, like, you're conditioned to think that they're more of a star because of that. And I think that's going to conspire against the Celtics, even if in a vacuum you should step back and say, like, damn, those guys are really good. Derrick White doesn't put up the same amount of points. I don't focus as much on him, but he impacts the game so much more than those guys. And so we just got to teach coaches to think a different way than they normally have. We have to teach fans how to think a different way, and I don't know if you can do that in the next 3 weeks.
If anyone can do it, Brad Stevens can do it.
Well, and that's why
Forsberg.
he's the most convincing person, right? Like, we know that Joe, I don't know if Joe calls Billy Donovan after the dust up in Chicago with Chicago. That
They came to an agreement in the end. They understood each
They were
other.
on the same page.
But if it's like, is it Trae Young or Derrick White? I'm guessing Billy Donovan could be a little, if he wants to be petty in that situation, feel free. And but
this
if Brad,
is the NBA.
But if Brad gets on the phone, maybe if Al Horford gets on the phone and says, Billy, my man, I'm playing with these guys. Yeah,
so we're talking about recruiting calls too.
I really feel like that's what you need to do, is that you need to have some sort of secret weapon here to get coaches to think. And I think, look, no one knows more than the people here, like who is valuable on a night-to-night basis, and they need to stress that to the people that are voting. And so it would be super cool if I could sit here and tell you, like, I'm trying to go through the Eastern Conference coaches. Like, does Jamal Mosley have enough time to sit there and go, Derrick White, net rating, like, like really good?
He may, because of the time that he's faced against the Celtics.
Pistons coach has a lot of time. Monty Williams has enough time to go through and check out some net ratings. But in general, I think teams are just going to invariably go back a little bit to reputation. I think a lot of coaches naturally try to spread the wealth a little bit, and you do definitely have to reward the teams that are in the best position. So if the Celtics stay as the best record in the NBA, I think that's another roadmap to 3 guys.
Definitely.
But I just think it's difficult. But that's why we have to educate the people.
We are.
So when all the conference coaches sit back to watch our podcast, and I'm now lumping myself
will.
into it.
Yes, you are. You are in the podcast.
I'm now in.
Yes.
They need to take our advice to heart.
So
I do want to push back on just one thing as far as phone calls go. Maybe Al Horford making phone calls.
Mm-hmm.
I think D White, everybody else texting. Just to.
Al with his plug-in earphones,
By the way,
the corded headphones.
Oh, yes.
He's
Old school.
always on the phone, walking into the
school.
arena. So, he's got time to make phone calls.
Who do you think he's talking to? I run this through
family.
I spend I probably spent an inordinate amount of time in my life walking around going, I spend maybe 7 minutes a year on the phone now.
That's true. Actually,
you
talking
also don't
on
have
the
cameras
telephone.
in your face, though. Al, I think, is trying to avoid any eye contact with those who he walks past.
I don't know, man. Come walk around town with me, man. No, I'm just, but I someone calls and I get angry. I'm like, man, I don't got time for a phone call right now. My friends know better.
My voicemail is literally don't expect me to listen to this, and don't expect a return call. Text me if you need anything.
You're lucky that I have a personalized greeting on my voicemail. I actually, at one point, I changed it. I was like, look, if you want to contact me, email me or text me, because I am not returning this call. So I agree. Al's got to be the one, because this modern generation is not going to be on the phone.
We're going down a rabbit hole hole here, but
tangent.
No, Abby, I think that you can confirm this too. Horford is on his phone, on the bus after games. He's on the phone,
who is
immediately.
he talking to?
I don't know who he's talking to. I don't know if it's his dad
his wife,
or
his family. I mean, those are family members.
This is a
for sure.
View from the Rafters episode that I need in my life. That if I don't steal this topic already,
it's going to be the most boring answer you've ever heard. We'll get Al Horford in here, and he'll say, "I'm talking to my wife."
Do
you think sometimes he's just faking talking to people?
Not on the bus, but I think maybe walking past people. I would. I'm not going to put it past me.
I think Al has a lot of people in his life. He's got people to talk to.
All right, back on the rails.
Yep.
Let's at least give everyone the information about how these teams come together. So
okay.
12 players from each team wind up making the All-Star team. Obviously, 5 from each conference are voted on by the fans and the media in that combination. The reserves, the remaining 7, are chosen by the assistant coaches.
And then there are some injury.
Correct. So
we'll
get into that. We will get into that. So the way that the reserves are voted on by the coaches is they vote for 2 guards, 3 front court players, and then 2 wild cards. So hypothetically speaking, they certainly could mix in 2 or 3 Celtics on their ballots and still have enough available for the rest of the guys.
I like what you're saying here, Marc.
I will say that I totally disagree with you on this. And this is not green Kool-Aid. I truthfully think the Celtics
I'll be the judge of that.
At minimum 3 players. I think.
At minimum.
Unless they go on a terrible
the Jays
slide.
Plus KP.
Or Derrick White, but I think that KP is in the lead right now. KP is an all-star in his career, so the name cachet is already there around the league. He's coming off the best season of his career and having
an even better season of his career. He's career high field goal percentage, 2-point percentage. He leads the NBA in points per post up. Like, you can go all the way down the list. And personally, I think that the Celtics have been unlocked by him coming to this team. Like, they have reached another level, particularly in the fourth quarter, which we recently saw in that Pistons game. We're recording this the day after that Pistons game, but he was the guy who carried them in the fourth quarter. Him and Derrick White, obviously, but his scoring in the paint, it just unlocks a different level of this team. And so I think that it's 3 minimum and 4 maximum. I don't think they're going to get 5. I think they can push for it, but it's either going to be White or Holiday is that fourth to come in. But I personally think it's 3 minimum.
Go ahead.
I would like to think that you're right. I agree. And in the argument, I think, as you said, Kristaps' impact on this team is undeniable. And we saw it when he went down with the injury, just how much they missed him.
Yep.
And they missed that added element that he has. But I agree, as the captain of the Derrick White All-Star team, I think that it's also undeniable when those coaches are looking at their scouting film that Derrick White doesn't show up every single time over and over again. And as you watch that film, you're like, oh, where is, like, we talk about it all the time with those blocks and just always making the right play. Like, where did he come from? Who is this guy? And he's freaking Derrick White. So yes, I think 4 is not great. I think it's, when you lay it out like
How
that,
do you feel about 3?
It's possible. 3. So my only hesitation here is that the numbers for both of the Jays are not what they were a season ago. And those numbers vaulted them into a different category. And so if you are going to think about the Celtics without actually looking at the net rating and the defensive rating and everything that they're bringing, you think, oh, well, if they need a second Celtic, it's got to be Jaylen Brown.
And isn't it weird? Like, Jaylen is playing the best basketball of his career, but his numbers are going to be
both ends.
Right, and he'll get less consideration because the numbers aren't as crazy as they usually are. Tatum is playing something less than his best basketball, but he will be a fan voted star. Like that. So it just,
but also his impact on the game, you could argue, is even greater.
You could say, like, he's learned in so many different ways, from the screening to the rebounding to the playmaking. Like, he's definitely impacting it more. But we fixate so much on scoring that it overrides the conversation for, like, what is an all-star and, like, what matters most. And I just think it takes education. I do think coaches are better attuned to, like, what matters.
Which is why they're the ones making the decision.
Right, but also we've heard, like, the horror stories of a coach who gives it to his assistant and says, "I just fill this out," and, like, you know, how much is that person putting in the necessary effort, and are they voting for friends? And I don't know. So, like, I don't love the process by which we select all-stars anymore. I also don't love, like, that there's only 12 spots, and I think,
yeah,
right. Like, we're just at an age now where there's so many stars in the league. It would be much better if we just went to 15. Am I going to be upset that some dude doesn't play 3 extra minutes a game because, like, they needed to get Derrick White on his first All-Star appearance more time out there?
Not to mention, if you want to make the game more competitive, and this is obviously still a showcase, and guys are trying to protect their bodies for the rest of the season, if the more bodies that you are able to throw out there, I think the more that affords for competition, particularly down the stretch and at the end of games.
I can say this. Adam Silver has been on this podcast, so let's hope that he's listening to it and he considers these changes. I don't know if they can go from 12 to 15, but at least another spot or two.
We saw what happened with Kemba Walker when they ran him out there for 30-plus minutes in the All-Star game.
Thanks, Nick Nurse.
Never the same.
I will say this. So your roadmap, for me, the roadmap to 3 All-Stars is the Celtics make a hard pitch for, like, who the second guy is. There's no splitting of the vote. That guy gets in. And then maybe there's some sort of injury, and the commissioner rewards the team that is atop the Eastern Conference, a player that maybe floats a little bit below the radar. I think if, like, Derrick White is getting it, it's probably Adam Silver saying he deserves to be there.
I am shocked that you and I are so different in our opinions on this, because I think Jaylen and Jayson are shoo-ins. Like, I think
Locks.
Jayson, there's absolutely 0% chance he doesn't get voted in as a starter.
I mean,
0.
so you just opened the wormhole there.
0.
Like, now, like, what happened? What was it? The Wiggins year where the band, the Korean pop band, like, all of a sudden the fan voting went nuts.
Yeah, but it's only a percentage of it now, right? It can be rectified by the media.
And who in the Eastern Conference are we
never
really?
Put faith in the media.
Yeah, well, but
Forsberg.
yeah.
Sorry, I love media.
Outside media.
We
outside
are the media.
Yeah, outside media.
Yeah, some of us
Scal doesn't believe he's a part of the media, but we won't go down that road.
We're aware.
But yeah, I think Jayson Tatum, there's 0% chance he doesn't get voted in as a starter. And really, in my eyes, there's probably only 4 players in the Eastern Conference who are shoo-ins to be voted in as a starter. And I think it's him, Embiid, Giannis, and Lillard. I think those are the 4 that are automatically, like, we know they're going to be voted in as starters simply because of their name brands around the country, around the world, and within the media base. So there's one other spot that's going to go to a starter that we don't necessarily know of. I personally think it's probably going to be Halliburton who gets that role.
Yeah.
Although Indy's faded, so like I wonder if some of that like fan voting cools on him, and but it's also in Indy, and like it makes for a good storyline.
Yeah.
So
Halliburton's getting in.
Oh, he's getting in no matter what,
one way or the other. Yeah.
It would be a cooler story if he gets in.
Reeling it back in, I think that Tatum is an automatic. And I think that Jaylen is going to be an automatic simply because I think we all know that he's playing the best basketball, two-way basketball of his career. And I think all of the other teams know that. Like the Celtics are not where they are without Jaylen Brown being that guy.
Well, and I think that's part of the overarching argument for this team is you talk about two-way players and the fact that the Celtics are the only team in the NBA in both top 10 in offensive and defensive rating. And then you look at the net rating and the fact just how good this team is and how willing everyone has been to sacrifice. And Joe Mazzulla talks about it all the time, that defining success looks different for this group, but that is absolutely true. We're seeing it in the results, and these guys are okay with that. Every single player to a man is happy with that. No one is gunning for shots. No one is looking to play iso ball just to make themselves look better. And that is clear in the mindset. And I just, like you said, Chris, as far as educating people, I just feel like that should be rewarded because it is not something that is prevalent throughout the league.
So maybe, and so this would be my pitch, because like as we get into like why every guy should potentially be there, like Jrue Holiday's stat line in just like from the 10,000 foot view is not going to be enough for someone to say he deserves to be a starter. And then you sit there and watch game tape and you watch how he pounds Cade Cunningham at the start of the second half and totally changes the dimension of that game. How he's willing to guard players that are 7 inches taller than him and can hold up. And
dives on the floor in overtime to save a ball, game-winning play.
But you also know that he can get in his bag. He put up 50-plus points against Indy a season ago.
So,
he doesn't need to do that on this team, and he is completely okay with not having to do that.
Everyone on this team has hurt their own all-star chance by embracing the desire to win a championship. And like that,
which is my argument, and that should be rewarded.
I think it's at the other side. And maybe this is just you being more realistic and me being more – glass half full.
Glad you hit the nail on the head.
A green teamer. Yeah.
I think that, this is the same thing that we saw with the Celtics back when KG came to town, right?
Yeah.
Like everyone had to sacrifice. None of those guys, and it was a different game then, but none of those guys averaged 20 points per game, but they were beating the hell out of every team that they played against, and you knew that at least 3 of them had to get into the game, right?
For sure.
So I feel like, again, if the Celtics
and the Eastern Conference stunk.
Yeah, if the Celtics keep on this trajectory throughout January, I just don't see how the coaches don't vote in at least one other guy.
I hope you're right. Like don't misconstrue. I'm being realistic in the sense that I think voting is flawed and it's going to be difficult based on the criteria of what the NBA has made this thing. But I do agree with you that hopefully the coaches save us from the rest of the process and say these are the guys that deserve to be there. We know, we watch ball every night, and reward the guys that deserve to be there, because Derrick White and Kristaps Porzingis deserve to be there. I just don't know if we're going to find a way to keep them in that car with the Indy 5, please.
But Forsberg, like you say, how numbers are such a big piece of this, and you're absolutely right. But I think in the NBA, and it's one of the things that I love most about this league, is that narrative is really important.
It's our favorite word.
And so the Celtics narrative is phenomenal, as we just laid out. But I also think it's really important, and why we all continue to sing the praises of Derrick White, who, as we know, as Isaiah Thomas dubbed him on Twitter,
amazing,
the most underrated player in the NBA still. So until he gets that All-Star nod, I think we can keep saying that. And
JJ Redick singing his praise.
That helps too. Once
it goes national, yes, it becomes part of the national consciousness and part of what people are talking about every day on podcasts, on the national shows. I think that helps so much. And the fact that this Derrick White campaign is off to such a sensational start.
It might be too early.
It's only going to help. It might be too early. I know the narrative might be coming too early. You're right.
He's been playing at this level for the whole season.
And he's going to continue to block shots.
Exactly. So. But I think we need to save the Derrick White as an all-star until we're a little bit closer to the coaches voting. So just so it's locked in a little bit and it's not like just noise at that point. But like, hey, at least the fact that he's even in the conversation is awesome. And I wish, again, like in a vacuum, I almost wish the Celtics could tell everybody, make the push for him because it means so much more to him. And I don't know if he's going to have, like he might play to this level, but we'll just expect it. So now, like in this year where it's so clear how good he is and the numbers are so off the charts, I just wish that they could take the campaign and really, really stress it.
You think it's more important to Derrick than?
Personally, I don't think it's more important. I just think these opportunities where you're like, he is definitively an all. Like, if he puts up these same numbers, if he comes up next year, he leads the league in net rating. We're like, oh, that's what he does every year, right? That's like true. It becomes commonplace. It's the same reason that Jokic doesn't win MVP award, right? So it's just the voting gets a little bit more difficult. Like this is the one year where you think, is there a chance he can kind of, and I don't even want to say sneak his way on there, but based on the way we vote, could he kind of have an easier path than in future?
The story makes sense.
Yeah.
Can we zoom out real quick and just think about? Can you imagine if he goes from not being on the ESPN top 100 players to then making All-Star within like 3 months of each other?
In the Eastern Conference.
I was looking at like most improved lists, and no one has him on the most improved
list.
It's impossible.
I brought that up in a game.
Well, it's because he's been so good.
Right. That's crazy.
But it doesn't make sense then. So how is he not on the top 100?
Should have him on the most improved list.
Yeah, they don't make him the most improved. Like so. Again, this is like what's fun about the league is that we come back and the storylines are amazing. And Derrick, but like. When you started asking me like who deserves to be there, and we can do the Jayson thing. Like I think it comes back to Derrick White, the numbers, the net rating, the efficiency when he's on the floor, the blocks, we can throw every nerd number out there, and he is somewhere in the top 10 of what he does. And to me, the differential, he's putting up Jayson Tatum-like differential numbers this year.
Mm-hmm.
My biggest argument for Derrick White is the way that his teammates' faces light up when you ask about them. When we were in Los Angeles,
which says a lot. Yes, it really does.
After the Laker game, and I asked Jrue Holiday, someone said something about this Celtics team and being elite, and I was like, speaking of elite, can we talk about Derrick White and those blocks? And Jrue Holiday's face is just like, yeah, I am a shot blocker for a guard, and I have no idea how he does what he does. Wow. And to me, that speaks volumes. That's a 14-year veteran. Jrue Holiday has been around this league, and the fact that he is amazed by what Derrick White does on a night-to-night basis, to me, says everything.
And D. White just had a huge block. I can't remember I think it was in overtime last night against the Pistons, right? In transition, going back. I don't even know.
That was the fourth quarter one.
Fourth quarter,
he blocked one at the rim right before.
His dad came in on Twitter and on X, and he posted, name another Eastern Conference guard who would make that play. And if you're going to name them, show me visual evidence. I don't know if they exist.
None.
I don't know if they exist. Yeah. And also for Derrick at the other end of the court, he's tracking to potentially have a 50-40-90 season here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you plug that in as I'm going to say role player because he's not one of the superstars of the team, but you plug that in as a role player on a championship contender, you want to talk about significant and being important to what's going to wind up potentially happening at the end of the season. Like, he's right there as one of the core members of that.
But he's also the guy who Joe Mazzulla talks about all the time. When the Celtics need to settle down their offense, need to make a play, they put the ball with as many ball handlers as they have on this team. They put the ball in Derrick White's hands and tell him to go make a pick, go do the pick and roll, run it, and he's going to make the right play every single time.
It was almost jarring that the last play the second to last play of that Pistons game when he didn't have the box out, like the one time that he hasn't been in the right spot. And what does he do? He goes out and scores 10 points in overtime and reminds us, like, there were times last season when he wasn't on the court in the fourth quarter in overtime, and I'm like, what is going on? Like, Derrick White needs to be out there, and now we all understand the value that Derrick White has and that you want him with the ball in his hands, so...
Marc, you know what I thought when I found out FlexCar was going to be our new sponsor?
No, what'd you think?
I don't know what I thought.
Neither did I, but then I went and checked it out.
And?
And it's basically a car subscription, and you choose the mileage package that fits you best, and that's it.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
It's honestly pretty cool. And it includes roadside assistance 24/7, car insurance, and maintenance. It's all included.
In one bill?
All in one bill. The only thing that is not included is the gas you put in the tank. And on top of that, it's cheaper. It's like 10 to 20% cheaper than buying or leasing a car. And what are you doing right now?
I'm finding my next car.
All right, well, if you're doing that, make sure you use the code RAFTERS and you'll get 100 free miles when you sign up.
We've heard the cases, at least I have made the case for Jaylen and Jayson kind of being automatics, in my opinion. We've heard Porzingis. We've heard Derrick White.
We haven't done
now.
enough Porzingis.
Yeah, we can
You want to go more on
Yeah,
Porzingis?
so,
Let's go.
down on KP.
Like, this is what's hard. Like, every time I want to make a case, I'm like, I want to make the really strong case for Derrick, but I can make a really strong case for Kristaps. And that's why I think coaches are going to be torn. Like, both are really hard. And I think if you're game planning wise, you're worried about Kristaps posting up because he's putting up insane numbers, like historic potential numbers in post-ups with the 1.48 points per play as we're taping this. And, like, I don't know how you stop that. Like, the Detroit Pistons sure don't know what you do.
No, I was
to
going to say,
stop
Monty
it.
Williams last night, pregame, just said it's complete chaos because you have a 7'3" guy who is hitting, what is he shooting above the break for three?
So he's
and
shooting,
who
like,
can just pull up. He's like, I don't even know how to defend that. You're in scramble mode from the moment you try to set your defense.
I believe he's at like 73 or 74% on all 2-point shots right now, which, like, for
Insanity.
someone who shoots a lot of long mid-range is a pretty wild number. And I don't know. Like, I just do feel like, we keep calling him a cheat code. And it is. Like, this is the one thing the Celtics haven't had through the years is someone they can just dump the ball into, take advantage of the switches, and they've gotten so much better. Like, I don't even think they've really tapped the full potential of, oh, look, there's a 6'2" dude on him. Let's get him the ball. When that happens, when they consistently do it, there was that game, maybe it was Memphis, where Jaylen totally missed them, and they end up like complicating that game.
Well, against the Pistons last night, though.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
could hear
Well,
Joe Mazzulla.
Oh my God.
Jrue just
He said it a lot calmer.
throws it in.
I was looking at the TV going, KB! Like, what are we doing? So he has added a dimension to the Celtics that they did not have before. I think you said that earlier. And I think he deserves to be rewarded for that. Like, he has taken them to another level as an offensive team. And, like, the defense has been outrageous as well. So even though his net rating isn't quite as sexy as Derrick White, no one's is.
No one's is.
So, it's a little harder to make the full metrics case, but I can give you 6 stats based on, like, the points per play on the post-ups, the shooting efficiency from the floor, the blocks on that end, when he's the screener, how good they've been, how good he's been as protecting he deserves to be there. It just comes down to the coaches need to vote.
And then you add to that the intangibles and the fact that Marc, like you said, he's coming off the best season of his career in Washington, and so many people questioned whether coming in here if he could be that third guy, and he has more than assumed that role, is happy in it, and has shown how much he can step up when it's needed.
Has he played enough games?
I was just going to say that.
We're
He
early.
has missed some
It's still
games on
early.
injury.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. And that could
I think
be why
he's played
then
enough where it's not going to go against
he
him.
hasn't missed enough where I'd take him out of contention. I just think if that becomes a deciding factor where you're like, oh, that dude's played every night. Like,
So then that's what you're saying. Brad Stevens makes the call, and it's about Derrick White, not about Kristaps.
Well, he makes a call about Derrick White, and then he says, oh, and by the way, Kristaps has been awesome too. I need you to put him on your ballot. And, he's going to play, enough games, and he's going to do that. I just think Brad needs to be the one who really sells it. I mean, he's a convincing man.
There's 52 players right now as we record this in the NBA averaging 20 points per game. All of them are taking at least, I believe it's 14 and a half shots per game. Kristaps, 12.8.
Crazy.
Like the efficiency and him buying into the role and being able to execute at a high level within that role, to me, it's just been a game changer for this team. And one thing that we have seen the Celtics lack over the past few seasons, when the going gets tough, and especially during the postseason when you need to win a game in crunch time, they haven't had a go-to play that they can go to every single time and know that it's going to work in some way, shape, or form. Now they have that with Kristaps. It can either be in a pick and roll, where like last night against Detroit, it was leading to a switch where he could go down in the post, take himself down against a smaller guy, or kick out, whatever that is. But they haven't had that dimension, to your point, Chris. And so now having that has just unlocked everything. And when they're winning at this pace, I just don't see, to me, like I said, he's the third guy who I think is going to make the team, minimum 3 guys from the Celtics.
I would say that's the most likely scenario too. Like if you're going to get 3, it's going to be those 3, and then you're going to cross your fingers on Derrick.
Yeah. But let's talk about Jrue. We haven't talked about
let's
Jrue
make
much.
the case for Jrue.
And, Jrue certainly has much more of the name brand. He's been on an all-star team a couple of times already
Just
in his
last
career,
year.
including last season. He's an NBA champion. He's been an all-defensive player for years on end, scored 50, as you said, last season. So how does Jrue Holiday get his name back into this conversation?
So I think, again, it's when Brad makes that call, you say, hey, let's hop on FaceTime for a second. I'm gonna show you some clips of what Jrue does and like how he changes us defensively. You show the clip of Joe Mazzulla going over before the season and saying, hey, look, you can do whatever you want on defense, and you just have to have a reason why you do it. And giving him like full quarterback control.
It's awesome.
Of like, yeah,
it's awesome.
And you show them what the Celtics gave up to go get Jrue Holiday and how much my heart still
And
breaks.
Rob Williams.
Not having Rob Williams.
Wow. Took you a while to bring
I
it
know.
up.
I know.
Is that a tear?
Yeah,
I think I see a tear brewing.
It was if the case is harder with Jrue, right? Like, because he's probably sacrificed more than anybody else.
Absolutely. There's
on
no
this
question
team.
about that.
I think you say if Jrue was to go play for the Charlotte Hornets and was the number one option on that team, even though LaMelo wouldn't throw him the ball or whatever, there's a world where Jrue Holiday puts up all-star numbers where you're like, yes, he's definitely an all-star, and you can't do that here. There's just not enough basketballs, but he's willing to do whatever they need and make the right play.
And to me, that's part of it. That was absolutely necessary for him to be that guy in Milwaukee last year, and he stepped up. I mean, Chris Middleton was injured for, the better part of 3/4 of that season, and Giannis needed a running mate. And Jrue Holiday was happy to say, yeah, I can be that, and come through every night while also taking on the defensive challenge of guarding the best player on every other team. And so I think that's really important to keep in mind when you're thinking about Jrue Holiday, but also just talking to the guys, the impact that he has made inside this locker room already. We are barely a third of the way through the season, and it was clear that Jrue, he came in, he missed the first day of training camp because that trade went down so late. And so he's still trying to figure out and define his role on this team. But just talking to Al Horford, and I mentioned how many years Drew's been in the league, but Al's been in this league, and Al has been a consummate leader in this league. And he said, Jrue, the impact that he has had, you can feel it. And I think it's part of the reason why the other guys are so okay with sacrificing their numbers for the better of the team. He embodies that. And then he also has the receipts to back it up with that championship. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think that can be discounted. And I feel like if we're going to recognize anything when it comes to Jrue, that is so important.
Let's also touch on a couple numerical things, right? The stats do actually give him some ammunition for this conversation. Jrue Holiday is a 2-time All-Star. This season, he's shooting a career-high 3-point percentage. Mm-hmm. He's got a career-high rebounding average. He's number four among East guards in net rating. So there are numbers there to support his case as well. But the craziest thing about the conversation, especially these last two guys we talked about with Kristaps and Jrue, is that, as you said, Brad brings these guys in. And you don't know how it's going to work out with so many guys who have typically had the ball in their hands, have typically been a number 1 or 2 on their teams. How are they going to perform as a number 3, a number 4, sometimes even a number 5? These two guys, in Kristaps and Jrue, have bought into their roles at such an elite level that I have not seen here with the Celtics since back in those days when Ray had to make that sacrifice, when Rondo had to make a sacrifice at times when his career could have taken off. I mean, that to me is the most impressive, and I do think that the coaches who vote on these reserves are going to pay attention to that. I don't know if that's going to lead to 3 reserves possibly being voted in, or 2. Maybe Jaylen does get in as that 5th starter. Who knows? But I do think that's going to be in the brains of a lot of these head coaches who vote.
This is where I wish that maybe we were a little bit more like the NFL. So, like, the NFL has spots on the Pro Bowl squad just for special teamers, right? We all know how important special teams are in the NFL, even though you would never vote.
To Bill Belichick.
Well, especially to Bill Belichick, but to everybody. So, like, Matthew Slater gets rewarded, even though he's not a guy who's out there on every down, who barely plays any wide receiver minutes. And, but we understand the value of what he is out there. I don't know if you need a spot like, okay, let's say you had a 13th and a 14th spot on an all-star roster, and you're like, this one's for a defensive specialist. And I know that runs counter to everything we want to watch in an all-star game, and so maybe this is just the stupidest idea.
But it happens every year anyway. Like, there's guys who check in, like, to be quite honest, I don't want to see Jokic in an all-star game because it's not going to be that fun.
Fair.
He's not going to be jumping over guys and
so,
slamming home
I
dunks.
see Nikola Jokic dishing out dimes.
Okay. I mean, I could see the passing, but it's I think when we think of the All-Star game, we think of these big, loud, athletic feats.
For sure.
And sometimes that doesn't happen.
So, like, let's say we had a defensive specialist on each team. East West each get one guy. It would be nice to reward someone who knows that they give up
Right. Who's playing the right way.
60% of their offensive energy to be the best defender in that conference. And I think back, Tony Allen probably would have never would have been on an all-star team, but could he have gotten consideration because he was so good defensively at times? It just opens the door to more players that maybe deserve that spotlight. And I do think the NBA is so creative with what we're doing with tournaments and the way we view it and the information that's out there. I would love if we could start putting a spotlight on more than just the scorers. And so if you did a defensive specialist, I don't know what you do.
I don't know, Forsberg. Now who's being unrealistic? You came in and started this podcast well, there's no way we're going to get a defensive specialist in the All-Star game. Maybe for the All-NBA, but...
Let's go ahead and cut that clip for 5 years from now.
I like where you're going here, though.
Thank you.
Mean, if we do add, maybe we just thought of something. Has the NBA considered this? If we add a couple spots and one of them is kind of dedicated in each conference to someone who's making the sacrifice, I guess, because that player is always going to exist, right? There's always going to be teams where someone is making a sacrifice unless
one sacrificial lamb per team.
Yes. Let's go.
No.
Yeah, no Abby, no sacrificial lambs.
What about the advanced?
I'm trying to think of ways for
metric
Jaylen
darling?
to get in.
Yeah.
And the best in-game dunker spot, because you want to see that in the All-Star game.
It's called the dunk contest.
That person, and he's probably on the All-Star team.
But then they should get to be in the All-Star team.
Why Mac McClung can go.
Jaylen is the best in-game.
It's why we dust off Craig Hodges for the three-point contest.
That's why I said in-game. The dunk contest is a separate thing.
Right. Well, Jalen's already going to be
Jaylen is
most dunks should automatically
get you in.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be funny if it would be some random big man like Rudy Gobert would, even on a non-All-Star team, would get there. But
I'm just saying, if we're going to do defensive sacrificial lamb,
again,
defensive specialist, dunker.
These would have to be something that, again, are voted by the coaches that's something that steps outside the All-Star, general All-Star criteria and gives them something to reward. And so if you're going to expand the roster, which will be a hard sell because then every guy who came before is going to be like, well, man, I made when it was a 12-person team, and now it diminishes a little bit. But if you threw in the specialist, I think it just opens the door. And
But this is exactly what Adam Silver has done on his own.
Right.
When there's been injury replacements.
Yes.
How about a segue right there? Adam Silver has actually chosen some of those guys in past years where they're not your name brand guy. They might not be averaging 25 points a game. They might not be leading the league in assists, but they're so important.
They might just be old,
to the,
like Dwayne Wade.
So I think I get where you're treading. I get where you're treading here. We should injure all the other players in the Eastern Conference.
Well, I mean, it happens every year, right?
I feel like that'll happen by itself.
At least,
we don't need to
there's going to be at least one injury replacement, usually on both the East and the West. So you're going to probably have 13 players who make the All-Star team technically. So when you're looking at this and it all boils down to it, can the Celtics possibly get one of those guys in through an injury replacement? Because when we look back, so if I told you about the 2015 Atlanta Hawks and that they had those four guys make the team, would you remember that Kyle Korver was an injury replacement? And that's how he made the team?
Probably would have guessed that there was some circumstance that got them the fourth guy. But I'm with you.
I didn't before I looked it up today.
Korver would have been. Korver would have been more. I would have probably thought he made it just on shooting 44.
Yeah.
But there's your specialist, right? It's not the defensive specialist, but it's the person who is
Korver
helping to fuel an extremely successful season by the Hawks that year. They went on. I don't
rewarding
even know how
an
many
impact
games.
player on the best team in the league.
I don't know how many games they went on to win that season, but they were one of the top two teams at the All-Star break that year. And actually, every single time, the last 5 times, that's as far back as I went because that's the last 20 or so years. But the last 5 times that this has happened, where 4 players have made it from the same team, they have had to be one of the top 2 teams in the league at the time of the All-Star break. And
usually by a pretty good mark. I feel like you need to have distanced yourself from the field. And that's the problem. Right now when you look at the standings, Philly's still lingering. I think they're going to get 2 guys. Milwaukee's still there. They're going to have 2 guys. That's the hard part is whenever I tell people and they say, man, the Celtics deserve more people, go do the exercise. Write it out. And then you get done and you're like, yeah, we'll get there.
I was going to say, but that's not what we're here for, Forsberg.
What did I do?
All right, go ahead. Let me hear your list. Let me poo-poo on your list.
I wrote it out. Okay, let's dive in. In the Eastern Conference, my definites, as I already spoke about, are...
I need to pull up. I need lists.
Lillard. You going to write this down?
No, go for it.
Okay. Lillard.
Looking at stats.
Embiid, Giannis, and Tatum. they're absolutely going to get voted in by the fans. They're going to be starters. The guards are the toughest spot. And unfortunately, that's where the Celtics are going to need to get two guys in Jrue and Derrick who are not.
What changes for Jaylen now because
he's
Derrick,
technically a forward.
Yeah, he got in as a guard.
He's technically a forward. But I do think that I think Jaylen is in great shape, and I actually think that Porzingis is in pretty good shape too. But let's go down this. So guards, okay? Let's hypothetically say that Halliburton gets in as a starter. Maxi's got to make it.
Yeah.
Donovan Mitchell, most likely. Team's not playing that great, but he's putting
there's
up
some
great
drama
numbers.
around Donovan.
Trey, great numbers. Not the greatest team.
Can't reward.
Gotta be there.
I don't like.
He's like the personification
it,
of all-star, like the guy who just scores. And it hasn't even been as empty calorie as I've thought in years past. He's been legitimately good this year. And even though I want to penalize him for his team not winning, I look at that roster and I can't penalize him for his team not winning.
And yet again, leading the league in assists. And then at that point, you've got the next three. Like one of these guys is going to make the team, and possibly two if there's an injury. Derrick White, Jrue Holiday, and Jalen Brunson. After that, we're talking about Mikal Bridges. We're talking about Darius Garland. Like, I think those three guys are above those other two that I just mentioned. Derrick, Jrue, and Jalen Brunson, I think, are the three that one of them definitely gets in. And then if there's an injury, maybe another one sneaks in. Going down to the forwards, or centers. I said Embiid, Giannis, and Tatum, absolutely. I think Jaylen gets in absolutely as a reserve. Probably Jimmy having another great season, actually career-high three-point percentage. And then at that point, you're talking about one spot between the following three as a shoo-in, because we're assuming 6 for the forwards, 6 for the guards. Porzingis, Bam, and Julius Randle. I think Porzingis is at the front of that group right now. And again, one of those other guys might sneak in as let me put it this way.
What about Orlando?
I was just saying,
but does Orlando definitely? I mean, Paolo's on there. Paolo and Franz are both on there.
Of all people, you're not going to put Paolo on that All-Star team
over these other guys. I don't think so.
I'm sorry, this is the way it goes.
Because look at the numbers.
The people are going to go down the stats and they're going to say, when we play the Magic, who are we most fearful of? And everything goes into stopping Paolo. And
you think that the
I'm not saying it's right. I'm just telling you, this is the way it's going to go. You can't have the Magic as the fifth, or at this point, they could be up at the fourth best team in the Eastern Conference and not give them an All-Star. Even Eddie House wouldn't do that.
That's debatable. But we've also got the Magic have not been playing great since they came to Boston. The Celtics kind of broke them. And we don't know what's going to happen in January.
Should get credit for that.
Remember,
Let it be noted.
Remember, these votes are coming in a month.
Yes.
Right? So,
that's true.
We don't know where the Magic are going to be at that time. They don't have that long-standing history of playing well through or getting into the All-Star break. So that's what I think. I think it's those three guys. One of them, Porzingis, Bam, and Julius Randle, are that sixth big man that makes the team. And then below that, I've got Paolo, I've got Franz, Siakam, and Barnes. Those are the other guys that I think are in that competition.
Yeah, maybe Toronto struggling will help a little bit with
his numbers are good. Scotty's numbers.
I mean, that's the thing, right? It just comes down to I can't get inside a coach's head. I don't know. They look.
You don't want to be.
No, exactly. They watch way more than I get to watch, and they fixate on certain things, and I'll be fascinated to see how that voting goes. I do think you've laid out a good argument as why the Celtics seem to be in a good
why there
position.
Is a chance that this conversation may be a little more realistic.
You want me to tell you another reason why I think there's another chance? 9 times there's been 4 players from a team that have made it. The Celtics have 3 of them.
Ooh.
That is an NBA record,
Yep.
And I think it could be 4 this year. I think they're going to need an injury in the end. I really do. But I think they're going to get 3 straight up, and then if an injury comes, I think they might get that 4th because Adam Silver tends to lean toward guys who are impacting winning. I think he does that. He prioritizes that over, say, a guy who's just starting to get his career arc into the All-Star conversation. So a guy like Derrick White or a guy like Jrue Holiday or Kristaps Porzingis, whoever's in that conversation, they're more established. They're a member of a team that at this point is the best in the NBA. I think that's where Adam Silver goes.
We need to get Adam Silver back to a game here when Derrick White's going nuts.
When he
but
scores 40.
I also think, and that's why this conversation is even more important, and we continue to further the narratives and why people need to get out the vote, because Adam Silver does see that as well. And so if Derrick White's name shows up on the returns for the guards over and over again, if Kristaps' name gets up there, it's in his consciousness as well.
Let's not forget that Kristaps has an entire country that can vote for him as well.
Ooh, well, an entire Baltic.
This is also true. I didn't want to expand it that far, but all right, Abby, I'm putting you on the spot. What are your predictions?
This is so tough being the captain of the team for Derrick White All-Star. I'm going the Jays, and I can't go against that. And Derrick White, I say 3.
Okay.
I think you get 3. It breaks my heart to squeeze Derrick off. Adam Silver, do the right thing.
Yes.
Find a way to get my man on there. But I will say, despite my entire reluctance throughout this program, D'Amico, you have broken me down.
Yes.
I will give you the W today. And I will say, just so you invite me back on this podcast at some point, I will say the Celtics get Jaylen, Jayson, Kristaps, and then there is a chance, if there is an injury, that Adam Silver does the right thing.
If I could drop this mic right now, I would. I can't. But I'm going to say the exact same thing. I think Jayson gets in as a starter. Jaylen is obviously voted in as a reserve. I think Kristaps gets in as a reserve. And then while I do think that Derrick deserves it and should be there, he might be just, there's so much depth in the backcourt in the East. I think he's going to need an injury. And if there is an injury, I think he gets in there. So
we don't root for anyone to roll an ankle, but
and I also think, just to put a bow on this conversation, Jrue Holiday will be totally fine. Not having to go to Indianapolis in February.
In fact, I think what should happen in week 3 of the marketing campaign, they should show the car pulling over to the side of the road, and Jrue gets out and he's like, Derrick, I want you there, stock exchange, brother, and then he just rubs the license plate and it goes to Indy 4. And then
grabs his luggage and then goes to Cabo.
Car drives away.
My favorite part of this is how well you studied that poster that we put out yesterday.
It was a good promotion.
Fantastic. Hey, Celtics marketing team. As I said at the start, they're going for the jugular this year. They're pushing all 5. We don't know if they'll get all 5. We're hoping for 4.
I will say the flip could happen here. And then somehow Jaylen gets squeezed or Kristaps gets squeezed. The Celtics suddenly end up with 2 guys out there, and Celtics Twitter is just a hot mess for 48 hours.
If that happens,
shaking their fist at the league.
If that happens, I say Jayson and Jaylen just don't show up. Boycott.
Whoa.
Pretty sure.
Boycott.
I know it's Indy, but people are gonna be there. There'll be a party somewhere they want to go to.
I do want to have an entire argument against these cold weather cities for the All-Star game.
We need to follow the Super Bowl model, right?
I'm not going. I'll just say that.
All right, that's a wrap. We've gone through all 5. We've got a pretty strong argument for all 5 guys. I don't think they're going to get all 5. Well, let's hope. Let's hope they at least get 4. That would give the Celtics 4 out of the 10 instances in the history of the NBA that 4 guys have made it on one team. Celtics would have 4 if they do it this year. So
let's do it. Yes. Get out the vote. That's the key.
Keep your eyes out for it. Vote at Celtics.com/vote. We need all your votes coming in for the players potentially getting in as starters. And then who knows, as Chris said, maybe if some of those guys show up on the returns, that influences what the coaches do and what Adam Silver does afterwards. So get out there, Celtics.com/vote. Let's see how many of these guys we can send in.